This is how Mussolini really died, not what history books say. In the final days of World War II, as Europe collapsed into chaos, one man who once ruled Italy with absolute confidence found himself running, hiding, and desperately clinging to the last threads of power. Benito Mussolini, once celebrated, feared, and obeyed, did not meet his end in a palace or on a battlefield. Instead, his last hours unfolded on lonely mountain roads, inside a captured truck, and before the unforgiving judgment of the very people he once controlled. What happened to him remains one of the most intense and unforgettable endings in modern history. Tonight, we uncover the dramatic fall of a leader who believed he could never be touched, yet found himself facing a reality more shocking than anything he ever imagined. Stay with us until the end, because the final moments of this story are truly beyond belief. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe for more powerful historical deep dives. Dear friends, the final days of Benito Mussolini are a story unlike any other in modern European history. For more than 2 decades, he shaped Italy's direction, controlled its institutions, and projected the image of a leader who would never fall. But by the spring of 1945, the world he built was collapsing around him. Cities were in ruins, allies were abandoning him, and the Italian people, who once marched in his name, now wanted accountability. What unfolded in those last hours remains one of the most dramatic downfalls of any head of state in the 20th century. As April 1945 began, Mussolini was no longer the confident figure who once stood on balconies speaking to cheering crowds. The Italian Social Republic, his final attempt at power, created under German protection, was breaking apart. German forces were retreating across northern Italy. Partisan groups controlled the countryside. Every road leading north was watched, and every bridge could be his last crossing. Inside Milan, Mussolini tried to hold what remained of his authority together. His meetings were tense, filled with uncertainty. Even those closest to him knew the end was near. On April 25th, the National Liberation Committee declared a nationwide uprising, and the city erupted. Streets filled with resistance forces, German units fell back, and Mussolini realized Milan could no longer protect him. That afternoon, after a final failed attempt to negotiate, he slipped out of the city with a small group of loyal followers, including his companion Clara Petacci. Though exhausted and visibly shaken, Mussolini still hoped for one last escape route. His plan was to reach Switzerland and then possibly negotiate safe passage elsewhere. For the first time in decades, the man who once controlled Italy was now simply trying to survive. To hide himself during this escape, Mussolini put on the uniform of a German airman, pulling a helmet low over his face and sitting among retreating German soldiers. His convoy headed north along Lake Como, a scenic route that now echoed with the sound of retreat. Mussolini believed this disguise would allow him to pass unnoticed. But Italy in April 1945 was filled with checkpoints, resistance groups, and local fighters determined to stop any high-ranking figure from slipping away. On the morning of April 27th, in the small lakeside town of Dongo, the convoy ran into one such checkpoint. Members of the 52nd Garibaldi Brigade, a local partisan group, blocked the road. The German soldiers surrendered quickly. They knew the war was ending. But the Italians began examining the passengers more closely. One by one, officials were pulled from the vehicles. Some tried to hide, others begged to be released. Among them sat a man with a pale face, stiff posture, and a German coat pulled high around him. A partisan named Urbano Lazzaro noticed the unusual passenger. Something felt off. The man's eyes avoided contact, and his face held a familiar shape. When he was asked to step out, Mussolini did not resist. The helmet was lifted, and in that moment, the truth was undeniable. The man who once dominated Italy was standing before them with no guards, no military formation, and no authority. Mussolini was transported to a farmhouse in the nearby village of Bonzanigo. Clara Petacci was placed with him, refusing to leave his side. For the first time in decades, Mussolini was not in command. He was a captive, and throughout the night, partisan groups debated his fate. Should he be delivered to Allied officials? Should he face a public hearing? Or should his accountability be immediate and final? By the next day, April 28th, the decision had been made. Walter Audicio, known by his wartime name Colonel Valerio, was given orders from the National Liberation Committee to carry out the execution. Whether Mussolini understood the decision is still debated. Some witnesses say he was silent, resigned. Others say he spoke only briefly. But one thing is widely accepted: he did not resist. Around mid-afternoon, Mussolini and Clara were placed in a car and taken to the small village of Giuliano di Mezzegra. The road was quiet. The sky was gray. The war was nearly over, and yet history was about to witness one more turning point. They were led to a stone wall beside a rural villa. Clara held onto Mussolini's arm, refusing to stand aside. In the moments that followed, the atmosphere was tense. Audicio stepped forward, raised his weapon, and opened fire. Mussolini fell first, then Clara. It happened quickly, ending two lives entwined by loyalty and downfall. But in a war-torn country filled with anger, grief, and decades of repression, the story did not end at the wall. After the execution, the bodies were transported toward Milan. Along the way, crowds gathered, each wanting to see proof that the man who ruled Italy for 20 years was truly gone. By the early hours of April 29th, the truck carrying the bodies reached Piazzale Loreto, a large square with deep symbolic meaning. Less than a year earlier, 15 resistance members had been executed in that very spot by Mussolini's own forces. Their bodies had been left out in the open as a warning to the public. Now the roles were reversed. The bodies, including Mussolini's and Clara's, were laid on the ground. Large crowds formed. Many shouted, some cried, and others released decades of pent-up fear and anger. It was a raw and emotional scene. To many Italians, this square represented years of hardship, and seeing Mussolini there marked the end of an era they wanted desperately to leave behind. As the day went on, officials decided to hang the bodies upside down from a metal beam, a stark and dramatic symbol intended to show that the years of control were over. Photographs from the scene spread across Europe and the world, capturing one of the most unforgettable images of the 20th century. The following day, Mussolini was moved to a morgue. For years, authorities kept his burial location secret, fearing that supporters might turn it into a rallying point. His body was hidden, guarded, and moved several times before finally being placed in his hometown of Predappio in 1957. Today, visitors still travel to that location, some out of historical interest, others out of lingering political ideology. But no matter how people view Mussolini's legacy, the way his life ended remains one of the most dramatic and symbolic conclusions in European history. His fall reminds us that even the strongest leaders can face a rapid collapse, and that power built on fear and control can vanish in a single moment when the people rise.